Muskies Canada and Muskies Inc. There is no other organization like them. It is probably the greatest fishing organization from a conservation and from a learning perspective that I have ever seen.
If Muskies Canada or Muskies Inc. went away, the muskie fishing as we know it today, I certainly believe would ultimately go away. I think that anything we can do to kind of support these organizations who are kind of behind the scenes working on all of our behalf to make muskie fishing better across all of North America is a huge thing.
And so if you're not a member of Muskies Canada, or if you're not a member of Muskies Inc. in the US, and you're a muskie angler, you're making a huge mistake.
Welcome to Tell Me About Muskies Canada, Kitchener-Waterloo. I'm really happy to be here. I am super excited about the speakers that I have. I even have a special bonus guest tonight to really surprise you guys. I got to make some room here with all my equipment. So we're already streaming to a bunch of people. Keep in mind that because we're splitting the stream between three, if you see 100 people watching, there's probably another couple hundred people on the other streams. And so when your comments come in, they're important to us. We're going to get to them. They show up live right here for me. And so here I see Chandra, and I can pop her question right up on the screen. So guys, we're going to get to all of your questions, and the murderer's row that I have presenting for us tonight, I would have never been able to get them without my good friend Todd Dowell from Toddy Tickle Baits. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know about Toddy Tickle Baits, go get in line. I promise it'll be worth it. The fish that I've caught on those baits are so many this year, I hesitate to tell you. So at the end of this broadcast, we're also going to be going into a meeting room. So anyone who is interested in the club business that we have, hearing about future guests and hearing about our accounting and from our treasury and about future prize tables, you can join. But really, what you're going to be interested in tonight is hearing from my speakers. I'll get my speaker list put up on the screen for you. If my producer, Mr. Ryan Fagundo, could put up that image in the next a minute or so, that'd be great. And I will introduce who these guys are. I can see most of them have gathered in the waiting room, and they're ready to share some really interesting information with you guys that's going to help you guys improve your ability to catch fish and fix some of the mistakes that you might be making. And so yes, Dave Bilal, who is a fellow chairman at Muskies Canada in Hamilton. If you live in that area and you're thinking about becoming a member, don't hesitate to join his club. He's got a great team, and they do a lot of hard work for the muskie community. All right, so here we have a small introduction of who's going to be on the show tonight. Most of you guys already know. That's why you're tuned in. We've got Matt O'Brien. We've got Matt Catfish Firestein. We've got JP Bushy. We've got Kevin Goldberg, which I'm told is pretty hard get. But again, thanks to Todd Dowell and Matt O'Brien and the guys, we ended up filling out the quintuplet with Kyle Garon. And so if you've heard of Slobland Flicks, well, we have those folks with us tonight. So when we're doing this, we're going to be doing it like a round table. That is the idea and the concept behind what I've created. If you've been to an Odyssey and you went to the Muskie Odyssey in 2019, you probably saw the big fish panel, and it had just some great muskie guys on that panel. And I was so intrigued by that panel. I didn't get off my seat listening to Hoser talk and Jim Sarek talk about where they thought the next world record would come from. Was something that I couldn't leave. I was on the edge of my seat listening to every word. And so when I started thinking about how to provide content for Muskies Canada and my club, I thought about that big fish panel. And so Tell Me About is a roundtable series where I ask the guys all the same question. And so we're going to be having a split screen with all the guys on the screen, and they're all going to answer the same question. Tell me about the common mistakes you see muskie anglers making while they're trolling. And we're going to talk about speed and depth and size and area and time of year and weather and all that sort of stuff. And come June, when you start fishing again for these muskie, today you may pick up some tips that speed up your process in catching fish. And so I see that we've got a decent amount of viewers just on one of the pages alone. And teach me catfish. So somebody put up a comment here that says, teach me catfish. And just a reminder that because of the platform that we're using, we don't always get to see your name. And so if you want to make sure we know who you are, and that'll make us happy. We're happy to be here together as a group. If you want to make sure to let us know who you are, all you have to do is add it into your comments. And I see that silly comment came from John Anderson, as a matter of fact. And we have a compliment from my buddy Anvar. Thanks, man. The organization really was Pierre, who is not only a chairman of Muskies Canada, but also on the executive board. Ryan Fagundo, who is an executive member of Mississauga, and Todd Dowell, who is a bait-making god. And so, yes, I'm going to kiss up to him all night. I like Toddy Tickle Baits, and so expect the odd compliment to fly Todd's way. All right, so I think what we'll do without any further delay, actually one quick further delay, I want to talk about one of our fellow chapters. It's Mississauga. It's now chaired by a very close and personal friend of mine, Mike Hauser, and he has a great team there, including my producer tonight, Ryan Fagundo. And he has managed to get an entire presentation next. Actually, Fagundo, why don't you pop on for me and pop up that poster, and let's give a quick promotion on Matt O'Brien. He's going to be doing it on March 18th at 7 p.m. on the Mississauga group. And so you can find a link on Muskies Canada Mississauga. And tonight, when you get a teaser about Matt O'Brien, not only can you go get more in just a few short weeks, but you can also win a full day guided trip. I am 100% signing up for that. So let's, I see that we have everybody in the waiting room. I'm going to bring on my 5 guests here and split the screen up. So let's, I see that we have everybody in the waiting room. I'm going to. All right. So far, let's all check out Matt's baits. If anyone wants to do any shopping, that is the here he is. All right. So far out of the 5 guys. Okay. So Kevin, have you got me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
All right. And JP, sir, how about you?
That's a little scratchy, but I can hear.
Okay, great. Yeah, so probably because you're yeah, we can hear you, Matt.
I can't hear you at all.
Okay, so if you want to leave the stream and come on back, or I can try putting you in the waiting room for a moment and then bringing you back in. How about now, Matt? Anything better? So guys, bear with us. I promise you it'll be worth it as we get everyone coming on board. Why don't we, Matt? Any improvement for Matt? And if not, maybe we should kick him out entirely and let him rejoin. So for now, we've got us three on board, and so while we're waiting for Kyle and the rest of the gang, why don't we get started? Why don't we see if there's any questions that we can get to before the roundtable question? There's a couple hundred people out here already watching, and so why don't you guys hit us up with a question? If not, I have a couple questions that came in already on my cell phone, which beg to be answered. And so one question coming in from a high-level fisherman that I know that I thought was interesting is, what are the factors that influence your decisions on your arrangement or pattern of baits on a trolling run? Kevin, did you get that?
Yeah.
So
you want me to?
Yeah. Why don't you head that one up?
What influences my decisions on what baits I pick for a certain pattern that I'm fishing? For me, a lot of times it's water temp would be first. Water temp's key for me, followed by local weather conditions. And third would just be the style of fishing I want to do that day. So I always talk about having baits that fish uniform together, similar to when you're casting. You want to throw a bucktail when you're throwing a prop bait. So same with trolling. You want to make sure your baits are uniform to run together. So I'll take those three things and get those three boxes out, let's say, and just pick a little different variation of those three boxes. But I base those boxes off of those three things: the water temp, the local weather, and just how I actually want to fish that day. And also if I want to target just catching a fish, or if I actually want to be targeting just big ones.
Still can't hear you.
What about now, Matt? Well, have we just checked as simple as the volume? So new technology, and just so you guys know, we did a trial run yesterday and earlier today. In fact, we had Matt and
weird.
Myself.
I could hear you guys before, and then you put me in the backstage, and when I came back, I can't hear you. It's got to be on your end.
Yeah. So I mean, everyone else is hearing me okay, Matt. Sorry, I know it's a little bit frustrating.
Really choppy and I think I'm experiencing the same thing Matt is. It's very choppy and staticky.
Yeah, so
and
JP,
freezes a lot.
Are you using Wi-Fi right now, JP?
No, I'm burning through my cellular data allowance for you, buddy.
I appreciate that very much, and once we get you cleared up, and so I wonder, is it worth trying Wi-Fi on your end, JP?
Ain't no Wi-Fi where I'm at, buddy.
Okay, all right. Well,
it's all set.
Well, we'll work around that. And so, did you have any thoughts on choosing your arrangement or pattern of baits that can add to what Kevin was saying?
Well, it's going to be hard to add to what Kevin or Kyle or Matt say all night tonight. I think that for me, I'm a minimalist with everything I do, and when I'm picking baits, it's two things: is all musky, 99% of the ones that I run can handle speed. So for me, unless we're talking like really, really slow and cold in the fall, for me, they're all going to be able to handle high speeds no matter what they are. Number one thing for me is how much exposure am I going to have to weeds? Am I going to be dealing with them in any capacity, whether they're popping out the water or down 12 feet? And sort of part and parcel with that is what depths do I want to run, and from those two variables is I'm a minimalist. If it's not anything to do with weeds, I'm putting a spinner bait out. And depending on how deep or high in the water I want to fish, I may select lures that I can put back a long, long way that won't dive at all, or lures that I can put that are going to really dive. So those are the only two things I really think about when I'm pulling something out of a box. Am I going to be anywhere near weeds, and how deep or how high do I want to go?
And so what would, if you wanted to be far back but not deep, what's an example of something you would choose?
For me,
there's lots of lures that you can there's any lure you can do that with, and obviously deep's relative. I mean, you can keep a plow very high in the water if you've got real bulky line and your rod up, and a lot of the good baits that can sort of cover that under 10-foot range just by changing rod angle and line diameter. You can take a bait that you'd sometimes plunk down to 10 and run it as shallow as 2 to 4 just by rod angle and how heavy a line you use and how far back or how tight you run it. So most of the lures, I'm a minimalist. Most of the lures that I run can do a little bit of everything. It seems I can, as I'm working structure, I'm putting them up, down, short, long. It just depends.
And what about you, Kevin? What would you?
A
what
good
would you
lure is
say?
one that you can.
For me, if I was trying to fish high and stay above weeds, or just trying to stay in the top of the water column, one of my favorite baits would be a jointed square lip bait, something similar to like say a Wiley style bait over weeds, especially with the rod tip like parallel to the gunnel. I mean, that's always good. Like JP said, I also am a big fan of spinner baits when you're trolling over weeds. One other thing that we do a lot at around my house that a couple of guys are doing now a little bit more to keep the baits high, and it's really neat compared to like a board. We run the large size stern planer board, and with that, I'll put it in the rocket launcher rod holder just like you would, a planer board rod. But that stern board, you could send the bait back. You could put a deep diving crankbait and just put it, 5-6 feet behind that stern board. You could send it back 100 feet or more, and it stays just like that 5 feet, from the board. But you could see the action. You could see the action on the rod tip constant. So when you get a weed, unlike a regular like side planer board or running the big boards where you can't tell, that stern planer, you can see the action the whole time. So that's been really nice to use cranks that could sometimes actually get deep, but you want them far away from the boat. The stern board's been the answer for that.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. And so somebody asked a question if the side of the boat matters, and so I thought that was an interesting question. Does it matter to you what side of the boat you're fishing on?
Who's answering that?
Well, why don't we start with you, Kyle, since you're on board now.
In general, like when I'm solo, or
yeah, if you're choosing a side of the boat, tell me which side you choose and why.
Well, if I'm by myself, I always choose the driver's side, just because I can hear the clicker a lot easier.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I think the issue is with computers. Kyle was trying to get in with a Mac. I was trying to get in with Windows. It wouldn't work. And I believe Catfish is also trying to get in with a computer. So someone should reach out to him and tell him to try to get in with his phone instead.
Okay. So
yeah, I was sitting there for like 20 minutes. I'm like, what is going on here?
Are you texting him, Kev?
Yeah.
Okay, just tell him to use his phone instead. That's what I had to do. That's what Kyle had to do.
Okay. All right.
So what about you, JP? It looks like we have you back right now. If you choose a side of the boat to fish on, which side would you choose and why?
No comment.
I didn't get any of that.
Okay, no problem. So Matt, why don't you field that question, Matt?
For me, like most of the time I'm running 4 lines. Like it's very rare that out there on my own. You know what? I'd probably go if I was trolling on my own. I'd probably go opposite, just because I can see I tend to never put my rod dunked in the water unless I have to. So I'll go on the opposite side of the boat so I can kind of sit like 3/4 sideways and keep my eye on the rod tip at all times. Whereas if it was on the same side of the boat as the steering wheel, I'd be backwards all the time, right? Turn backwards, not being able to see where I'm going. So if it was just me, I'd say I'd probably put it on the opposite side of the boat. I'd keep my rod tip out of the water and keep my eye on the rod tip. Where I fish, JP and Kyle know this very well. I don't know what it's like down where you are, Kevin, but where I fish, if you touch a rock with a lure, you get this, we call it rock snot. You get this black goo all over your hooks and all over your lip. So if I'm fishing structure, I got to keep my eye on the rod tip at all times, because I could just touch a piece of structure and I'm trolling around rock snot for an hour. So I'm always watching my rod tips constantly.
Okay, so we don't have the whole gang on here yet, but I think we'll start with the tell me about. And so Kyle, why don't you take a kick at the cat? Tell me about the most common mistake you see muskie anglers making while they're trolling.
Well, I don't get in very many other people's boats, but when I do, the one thing I do notice is a lot of people don't have their gear in like the absolute pristine condition it should be in. Like they're just setting themselves up for failure. What I mean by that is like leaders, especially if I'm using like other people's rods, first thing I look at is leaders, line, like check your knots, phrase, especially if you're hitting bottom a lot where you're fishing. Check your leaders for phrase. Your snaps should be like switched out at least every couple weeks, if not more. Keep your spools maxed out with line, because like if you cut, especially on wire, because the diameter is so thick, if you cut 20 feet of wire off your reel for whatever reason, you get a backlash or whatever, snag, and then you go to put your lure down and you put like 40 feet on your line counter, well, your lure is not going to be in the same spot as it was before that 20 feet got taken off. So always try and maximize your spool for that reason, and just for the amount of line you can pick up when you're reeling in your bait.
Well, it's almost like calibrating your line counter, right? Like if you lose 100 yards and you're looking at your line counter, it's wrong, right?
And then if like you can still fish with it, but just go out and don't just drop your lure and be like, oh, it's 15 feet down. Make sure it's 15 feet down. Check it. Go over something where you're not going to get snagged up and be like, because you might have to let out an extra 4 feet of line to make up for that loss in diameter.
Right.
And one other point on that, what Kyle was just saying, a good way, because that's true. Like we all go through that with the guy next to you's got different amount of line or different whatever. His spool's not full, and then he doesn't know where he's at. One thing that you could do that helps a ton is just buy one of those little $15 Rapala line counters. I always bring those on my trips. And that's a way that even if you're under spooled and you happen to get a bait that's going or a bite that's going, you better check it with that Rapala counter so you can duplicate it. Because if you think you're going to just duplicate it with your line counters, like Kyle said, you might get one tangle or cut line and now you're no longer hitting it. So I write my Rapala line counter depths down once I get something that's going, just so I know, no matter if I re-spool or whatever, so I know exactly what that was. That's the only way to get a true read.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Also, another thing I do is I keep notes on every trip, because, every body of water I go to, I'm using different baits. So a lot of times I forget the exact dive curve. So like on each given day, and depending on your rod angle, like I'm running my back rods, they're dunked because I'm running higher rods over top them. So you got to know, what that bait's doing with the dunked rod versus the rod up top. So on any given trip, I'll always keep notes on my phone so I can just have quick access.
Yeah,
So
I would have never thought to change out my snaps every 2 weeks. That is not something that I mean. At the same time, I'm not typically catching 50-pounders, and so. But I certainly, and you know, my friend Bill from Husky Muskie Leaders is going to be very happy that now I have to change my snaps more often. So that will certainly increase my order size.
It's after you lose fish because of your snap that you're just like,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Like I've had fish open up snaps casting that I put on the day before, and I'm just like, how is this possible?
You didn't close it.
No, it was closed.
And so Marlon, who is a guide in on the St. Johns River and a heck of a guy, and he works with Muskies Canada as well. And so he has an interesting question about what is the deepest that you've caught a muskie. So bait depth, not feet of water. But I'm going to add to his question and ask both whether it was over open water and how far you were down. And so JP, if your signal's coming through, maybe you can answer that one.
I literally haven't heard a word of anything yet.
Okay, so do you see the question on the screen? What's the deepest muskie you've ever caught?
You can't hear it.
All right. Why don't we give that to Matt O'Brien first?
Oh man, it's a good question. You know, I've seen him coming off bottom. Like I've marked him down 40, 45 feet and had my bait down 20, 25 and the rod's gone off. But how deep my lure actually was, the deepest ever, I'm going to say 30 plus feet. Exactly, I'm not 100% sure, but I run my baits down 30 feet all the time. So, yeah, 30 plus feet for sure.
And I think Kevin, he was asking the opposite.
No, that's good. I'm happy with that. And
what was he asking?
No, that's
how deep the fish was.
Oh yeah. Like I mark fish on bottom in 40, 45 feet of water all the time, and have my bait down 20, and they'll come up and spank it. It's usually in clear water you see that happen though.
Yeah, right? I was gonna. For me, that's what I was gonna say. I've caught them 45 feet down in like 62 feet of water. That's the deepest I've actually had my lure down and caught him. That was on wire with a marge bait, you know, and I know exactly what it took to get that depth. And my buddy that same trip got one like 42 down. So we got two fish that particular trip that deep. But that's the deepest I ever caught one, 45 down on wire.
And so, Kyle, why don't you tell me what the deepest depth of water you've ever fished and anticipated actually catching a fish? Now, you may not have been down 80 feet, but are you fishing open water like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, Matt knows this very well. We've caught fish over 180 feet of water. Lots, with baits not 180 feet down. I typically I don't really run baits deeper than 30 feet ever. Well, super cold water, I'll put a bait down 35, but for me, that's where my confidence level is.
Yeah, my school of training, and I learned from a guy who probably never intended to become my mentor, but Peter Levick, who's a Hall of Famer and a former Muskies Canada president, and a hell of a great guy, and he couldn't be on tonight, so he won't get to hear me talk about how great he is. But he has taught me a lot in the last few years since I first fished with him in 2019, and I've always learned that, you know, one barometric pressure is, I think, 30 or 33 feet. And so I always stay at a maximum of that 30 feet range personally. Depending on the temperature of the water, obviously going down to 35 in December, you know, they're going to be fresh and lively and all that sort of stuff. But I've never caught a fish in open water over 50 feet deep in my history of catching muskie. but catching them over 180 feet of water, that's pretty cool. That's a true blue water fish from the sounds of things.
I was going to add one more thing too. Like most of my fish that I have caught deep have been like 30 to about 35, a lot more in that range. I only have maybe one or two over 40, but where those came, like we dropped a Klein finder for the thermocline down at the Georgian Bay all the way to the bottom and bring it up. And at that particular time, it was the same temp within a degree all the way from the surface to the bottom. That's the only time I've caught him that deep. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Matt actually it's not trolling, but we found a fish trolling that we actually caught jigging.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time we gave up on trolling, it was like 45 feet deep, over 60 feet of water. I threw a Bondi, and it ate. I don't know where it was at that time, but it ate the bait on the way down. So it was in the 40-foot range for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was when we marked it, but there's no way your bait got to bottom. Like
no, but we were over like 60 feet of water or something like that.
60, 65 for sure. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so a question came in that fills out that story, which is when you're fishing in shallow water and it goes out to deep, and you're in 80 feet or even 180 feet of water all of a sudden, how close was it to that shallow area?
Matt?
Sorry, say that again. I was admiring myself.
Hey, look, I'm glad you changed the camera. It worked out well. And so we were just talking about catching open water fish and wondering how far that deep open water was from the shallow water.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Like I catch them. I mean, maybe it does, but I catch them like
nowhere near.
Really far away. Like, I mean, they're definitely not oriented to shoreline whatsoever.
Okay, so nothing to do with shore.
Yeah.
What about structure?
Where I fish, the Cisco's are the structure. Like Kyle and I have been out trolling in one evening and seen, like, on a big mayfly hatch, 3,000 surface in one night.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped counting at 2,000. I'm just like, this is nuts, right? So we're just fishing around big schools at Cisco.
Yeah, we'll post those GPS coordinates later for you guys, but for now, we have to let them have another beer or two before we get that. And so Rob, I've sent them each a case of beer to try and lighten them up a little bit.
I put a cooler next to me, so I have to get up.
And all right, Mr. Goldberg, what about pounding rocks? Do you ever pound the rocks?
Yeah. It seems like I don't know. I really enjoy that style of fishing. So when I can and I'm trolling, I do like to be aggressively pounding the rocks. I mean, I'm touch and go, like I'm hitting them on and off. I don't just drag them or anything, but I love skimming on them and back off and on and back off. Like I love that style fishing. It's aggressive. I have one of those little suicide knobs on the wheel, like you get for like a lawnmower. It saves your shoulders. But as a driver, when you're trolling, there's no way to be more involved with the throttle and actually the structure than when you're doing rock trolling. To me, that's like the best. The first time I took my buddy up to the Georgian Bay, I said, it's not going to be the most fun trip for you, just so you know. I'm locking my chair this way to the screen, and you're going to be seeing a lot of this. But like as a troller, it's it's one of my favorite ways to catch them is pounding rocks like that.
So just so you know, the user manual in the riding lawnmower says that knob is so that you have a hand free to drink a beer.
Yeah. Well, that's all good right. For that too.
So while you're pounding rocks, do you ever go really shallow?
I can't. Like where I am, if I touch, like I said before, if I touch a rock with a bait down anything less than 18 feet, I get that rock snot. Do you get that rock snot down south, Kevin, at all? Do you get? Or do you not even have rock?
No, not really. I mean, we don't. No, I really don't. I mean, there's not much for rock in our lakes, but I fish places with rock, and some of them, I know what you mean. We call them like the gooey shoals, and you get that goo, and it's a pain, and it stinks, and it's hard to get off your hook. So, like, I have stuff marked like it's bad with a skull and bones if I know I can't run like 25 down because it's too much goo, you know? So, like, I have marks on my GPS to avoid that just to help, you know? But if you got it all over, that'd be tough.
The entire, like, anything. It's funny once you get. I don't know if it has something to do with how far the sun is penetrating, light's penetrating into the water. But after about 18 feet, 20 feet, you can pound rocks all day and get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But all the shallow stuff's just covered in it.
Yeah.
To add to that, when you're pounding rocks, like you don't want to drive over a like 16-foot rock with your bait down 25 feet.
Yeah.
You want your bait maybe a foot deeper than the rock structure you're going to hit, or you're just going to ruin your equipment.
You just want to like tick them. You just want to tick it here. Just tick
just
here.
Roll
tick.
off them.
Yeah.
Georgia Bay is great for that.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a story where I was fishing some ultra shallow water. One of my dearest friends that I made because of Muskies Canada, his name is Jamie Sebastian, and he's a lifelong fishing guide, and he takes people into these backwood areas and just these little pristine Lake X, he calls them. Like there's got to be like 7 of them. He's like, we're going to Lake X, and the accent he puts on X, I have to know which one that is. And I fish out of my little tin boat, and just a little 9.9 on the back of it, and I regularly troll a handlebars blazing walleye. Just I think they call it bulging, just bulging out of the water, and I will have my my motor on release so that it bounces off of the rocks, and I've caught muskie in under 3 feet of water doing that. In fact, 4 of them in one trip doing that exact same thing, and it always, even on the 4th one, I was still shocked when it hooked up and came out of the water like I was fishing top water. It was pretty cool. But it was such a cold lake. There was no rock snot whatsoever. It's not like Georgian Bay where the water's so clear. It's more of a tea stained water. So
yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that, what the water clarity is, because typically,
so it's clear.
Water,
it's got visibility, so it's not like Lake St. Clair, but it is tea stained, because it's a backwood lake. It doesn't have a single cottage or anything on it, and so very, very cool. And so Rob was, there's your answer. I don't catch a ton of muskie, but every now and again I will catch them in super shallow water. And let's see, Brian, who's a member of the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter. I didn't read this question first, so I'll just read it now, and I trust him. When trolling in the vicinity of an underwater hump, do you concentrate on being close to or just above the hump? Or are you 20 feet off where the bigger fish could be staging?
Kyle, you take this one.
All of the above.
Yeah.
I would start off and wind my way in to the top of that structure. There's always fish floating around the sides for sure.
That could be another answer for Kyle on what mistakes other guys make when they're trolling. Kyle talks about that all the time. He sees people roll into structure. They just drive over it once and they're gone.
Yeah.
Got that covered. Your lure's this wide.
Yeah.
Yes. You're going over a shoal that's like 50 yards wide.
I kind of almost run them like a racetrack that's closing in on you, and each lap you lose that outside layer, and eventually you end up right on it, and then at that point, fine, you've hit it with everything you had. But like Kyle said, I'll start off and work in, turn and come back, and then start the racetrack thing a little bit, and if there's quite a few in close proximity, I'll run the whole stretch and then do the whole stretch in tighter, and then again. So sometimes to work it out effectively, it takes an hour, depending on how big it is. It does. So
I like that comment. If there's a couple in close, so you don't have to change your lure or reel up lures.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You do, 2 or 3 at one depth, and then you change your lures, and then you do all of them at that different depth and continue from there.
I agree.
Another good tip if you're doing that too is to change the trail color on your Navionics or on your base map. If you're running a trail when you're trolling and you're doing like everything at say 25 feet, and then you're going to bump into 20 or 15, switch your trail color so when you get back around to the other side of the structure again, you can see where you were with one lure versus the next. Like by the time I'm done fishing a structure, I'll have 4 or 5 different colors of trails covering everything with spaghetti.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's good for open water too when you're going in between 2 bumps. Like say you're going between 2 pieces of structure, instead of trolling that exact same line in between them, you see where you went with which one and just move over a little bit.
Yeah.
Even when you're turning around and coming back onto it, you can cover more water that way. And,
it goes back to what you said a while back about mistakes, but when you guys both just said that, it made me think of a mistake I've seen when I'm with people fishing structure like that, like picking it apart. You learn real fast that your Navionics charts, they're good. They're a reference. But I've seen people that believe in those to the point they're like, well, I can't get in that. That's dark blue. Well, some of the best areas you're trolling are in the dark blue. So like you think you can't go, when you start picking those spots apart and doing the circles like that, you can start itching your way in, and I push it a little more each time. And eventually where it looks like I'll be looking at 3 feet of rock, I'm trolling 20 down. So you got to learn that that's just a reference. I know we're about out of that phase because now all the graphs are drawing their own maps by sonar, and it's going to get way better. I know. I mean, that's already happening. But for the guys that always use like the old Navi, I mean, I still use my old charts, and a lot of my stuff that I have marked from picking those spots apart are spots that guys I've been with won't even cut in there because they're like, no, that you can't go in there. That's out.
100%.
Yeah. To add to that, a lot of times, like especially on like Lake Nipissing, it's mapped brutal. Number one, I'll go in and without lures and just with the trolling motor up, put my motor up and just chart it out before I even fish it. And then you're just fishing with confidence the whole time after that, right?
Yeah.
Auto chart live is definitely a good thing, and Navionics is just a guide even in the sense where it looks like it's clear. You shouldn't be doing 54 miles an hour through a narrowing. Maybe slow it down and double check that in fact it is 12 feet deep all the way through there, especially in the French.
That being said, though, I find the auto chart live as good as it is, and how much better it is than the Navionics. You still need to use waypoints too.
Yeah.
Like if you get in there, like it's still using an algorithm to draw a contour line, right? There's nothing that can ever replace a waypoint, because the waypoint is like sticking a pin down on the map, right? Whereas opposed to the auto chart live, just drawing a contour line that may not be exact, but those waypoints are almost exact, like bang on every time.
You might be able to eliminate some of your icons, though. That's
absolutely.
what I find.
And to really use those charts to their full potential, not many of us actually do that. You have to go out and grid the spot, and like what they want you to do to draw it as best as those auto charts can do. A lot of guys, a lot of times when I'm trolling, I'll just turn it on and see what it draws for me that day. And if I'm back on that lake, I'll do it again, and it'll draw it a little better. But Hummingbird wants you to go out and do that whole crisscross grid pattern. That's great if you have the time to go do it. But a lot of people, if they don't have the time, they're not doing that, it's not quite as accurate that way either.
Luckily, I have the time.
Anvar.
Yeah.
Here comes Anvar. Anvar is swinging. So Anvar wants to talk about June, early season opening weeks question for non-Cisco waters. So a water system that doesn't have Cisco. Besides targeting the typical shallows, do you or would you bother targeting any other depth range away from typical early season tactics most would concentrate on? So where
Cisco?
Yeah.
I have a lake that's what he just asked is exactly what I have. So I have a lake that I start for like when you guys do, like early June, that there's no Cisco. And it's 2 ends. This lake in particular, the one end's deep and clear, and the The lower end of the lake is shallower. Main depth, the deepest part's about 18 feet deep. It's a little bit more stained. And to answer that question, yes, like sometimes we'll troll short line, and we're trolling like close to the new emergent weed growth, and we've caught them that way. But we've also, in early season, especially for some of the bigger fish, like I'd say the weed line is great, and if the temp's right, the females are there. But sometimes if it's like a late spring, some of those fish you could actually get, they're still out kind of, I say sulking or resting or what have you, but we've caught them out in open water, running boards and stuff like that, out in the middle of the lake. Okay, so it's opener, and we're catching them out in the middle. But if we're in 16 feet of water, the fish might be coming. Our bait's 5 to 8 down, I'll say 10 down, kind of like a half the column kind of depth zone with the baits. But sometimes when we do that, you might not catch as many of the smaller males, but when it goes, usually they're bigger females. So that's right out of the gated opener.
Yeah, I would say it depends on weed growth for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's like all year. If you have a cold year and the weeds are bad, you might scrape up a few there, but like I don't know, it just all depends on the year and how warm your spring was, you know.
It's like how fast the ice goes out too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like sometimes, like if the ice goes out early and the weeds get green, while the water's still fairly cool, the muskies will stay shallow too later. But if they're done spawning and the weeds are dead, they're gone.
Yeah.
They're out of there instantly.
And plus
really good.
And plus I always feel like no matter where I'm at, I always feel like there's two different fish. I always feel like there's fish that just like being in open water, like this particular lake, they're feeding on schools of perch and white perch. But there's fish that like being out there, and they lay close to the bottom even at times, and you're catching them, they're out there. And then there's fish that are right on the weed edge too. Like in that particular lake, you could do that day in and day out. It's kind of like what you want to do, you know? Yeah, and sometimes you'll see a difference in your size depending because of it too.
You got to eliminate your options no matter what, either way.
Yeah.
Plus those fish that are out in the open water, they're not getting harassed by everybody either, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So you're more likely to get an eater out there.
Mm-hmm.
So someone else is asking about trolling a river system, and almost everything I read is geared towards lakes. Do you guys have any specific advice for a fellow who fishes the river systems?
I mean, I'm on a river right now. That's why you notice the fancy painting behind me. I'm down in Virginia right now, actually fishing the rivers. But the river he asked about, I fish that as well, the Monongahela. And I mean, if his question's about trolling, for me, trolling the rivers, I mean, again, I don't. Did he have a particular question or just more basic info?
Yeah, just any key pointers. So your top 3 things you would tell someone fishing a river system.
Okay. First thing would be, for me, I'm usually there when I'm fishing rivers and I'm trolling. It's always like after May, I'll say. So they're done with the spawn. They're already recovered and on the feed. That's when I start trolling rivers. I cast rivers now, but I troll them. And when you troll, a couple things, you want to look for an area that's got a lot of irregular up and down, right? So in a river, when that current's rolling by, that up and down irregular bottom, that's their structure. So you don't have to look for all this stuff, fancy stuff when you're trolling them. Like a river like he's on, that river in particular, I know has lots of little dips. It might go from 5 feet to 9, 6, 8, you know, just a couple 2 and 3 foot dips. And those fish will lay right in those dips. And you'll speed troll over them. And 90% of the time, as soon as you come over that, sometimes you'll mark them in there too. But as soon as you come over that dip, the rod goes. So like I look for an area, if I'm trolling that area and kind of scoping it out, I'll look for a spot that has the most irregular bottom and speed troll over it. Like pikeys, we do really well with like pikeys, min-tier pikeys, Ferris pikeys, stuff like that. Wiley lures, like the jointed, square lip, that kind of bait again. That seems about the best for me in the rivers. And like I said, and just looking for, and your speed trolling. Like when I'm in the rivers, we're going fast. Like typically not very much less than 5, I'd say 4.8 to 5 in the summer at least. Yeah.
And do you ever use the current and fish it like a bait elevator?
I watch that for depth if I'm fishing deep, but like in the particular river he's talking about, no.
Okay.
Like we troll up and down. The river he was just talking about, I'm just looking for those ridges, and because like some rivers I fish, like we'll only do a pass up current, you know, and I know being at some places like the Detroit River, it makes a huge difference, you know, and if you're pulling stuff down, you'll be dragging bottom when you reverse it, you know, so you got to watch and get your speeds going both ways too, especially if it's strong current. But the particular one he just mentioned, I don't. I just set my lines and run a few feet down over those ridges and just kind of troll right over top of them, speed troll.
Great. So Brian Denemy and a few other guys have asked questions related to bait color. So how do you guys choose your bait color? How is a new guy, or how is someone who is not as experienced figuring out what color of baits to run to start their day?
I would start with figuring out what the forage is in the lake, number one.
Okay.
And then the water clarity adds to that. And if nothing else works, black or white.
Can't go wrong with that.
And so a lot of the St. Clair guys, a lot of the guys that I know that are heavy experienced on that lake, when they catch a fish on a fire tiger, so if they're running a spread and they've got a fire tiger out and this fire tiger goes off, they will switch all of their baits to a fire tiger. What about you guys? Have you ever started doing that, running a number of similar baits? Or do you always keep a various spread and perhaps have a black perch running instead of trying to run a similar fire tiger?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. I guess it depends where all you go. But like I used to go every year to St. Clair, a couple weeks a year, every year. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I remember now they're on black sucker. Well, it's tough shad black sucker, the white belly, you know. So I'm getting those out, and then I'm seeing what artifacts I have that are the same thing. So I know what you're talking about there. And that's true. Like you get in a certain mud line and you're trolling that mud line or something and the browns start going. Like, so I've experienced that. You hit the blue water and then all of a sudden like these natural patterns go, you hit the green water and we're catching them on frogs. So like I've done all that, and I've done, just like you said, reeled in the whole fleet and switched them all to either what's going or something real darn close. But I'll be honest, outside of that, when I'm not there, not really. I'll run, like Kyle said, something that at least something that the main forage, I'll have if it's perch and walleye or something, or suckers, I'll have one or two of those out, and then something different. Like he said, a black is always good, some variation of black, and maybe just sometimes it's just a confidence bait if I'm on like natural lakes. And then if it's reservoirs and like dirty water stuff, for me, it's a lot of whites and brights. I always say when in doubt, white and brights are going out. That's just the way it is for home lakes for me.
All right. And you guys down there on the bottom of the screen, have you guys ever reeled in your whole fleet and changed them to similar patterns?
Well,
I don't. I might put, well, if one rod goes off twice, then I might put two of the same color out, but
okay.
We don't get to run 16 lines.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no fleet. And
Yeah.
the water that Kyle and I fish, for the most part, is low density water too. So I tend to just kind of stick with the confidence colors, the tried, tested, and true colors that have worked for year after year after year, and I just lean on them really hard for the most part. In the river, I fish a lot of Cisco patterns, and out in the lake, I fish more walleye and perch color patterns, basically. And if it gets really stained, I'll switch it up and brighten them up a little bit. Fire tigers, more whites, blues. But for the most part, I'm just leaning on those really, really high percentage confidence colors.
fire tigers actually, like those super bright colors, actually work really well in ultra clear water for some reason.
That's like a color that works in everything for some reason. Yeah. Everything.
Because it looks like a perch.
Stands out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a bright perch. Yeah.
This exact bait, it's a 10-inch hellebarde, and it's clearly a fire tiger, and it's just a regular lip. This bait, I was out fishing, I believe, with my 9-year-old daughter on St. Clair this fall, and Todd hit me up with a text message and asked me what I was running, and I told him, and he goes, no, take that off and put on a Fire Tiger. And then he told me how far to put it back, and my daughter's like, what are you doing? How come you're doing what he said? I'm like, I'm just going to humor the guy. And I mean, literally 2 minutes later, we had a fish, and then 10 minutes later we had another one. And so now whenever he pulls a Babe Ruth and just points, I just follow. But yeah, Fire Tiger is not something I normally would have run. But I was happy to get some experience with it in the last 2 years. So, all right. Matt seems to be experimenting with his camera here. So
no, I had to plug in. My phone was gonna die.
I'm just gonna grab something too. I'll be right back. Okay.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey, Kevin, if you have another phone there, call Catfish.
Okay, I will.
Tell him he needs to use his mobile device. His computer's not going to work.
Yeah, or if there's any listeners on here that know Catfish, give him a quick ring, let him know. So let's move along to another question here that I've got. As in flow, what is too much flow in your minds to flow? Okay, so that's an interesting question. So basically, Edward's asking us if there's too much current in a river or too much water flow. Is that something that you would ignore? Is there a certain level? When I'm drifting the Niagara for walleye, I want to be in a slow drift. When I'm drifting it for steelhead, I want to be in a medium drift, but I definitely don't want to be in white water. And so has anyone got experience with heavy flow?
We'll keep the phone.
Well, when I fish the St. Lawrence, I'm always looking for current breaks. Like those muskies they're late, especially the big ones. They're lazy. They're going to be smashed to bottom or behind something waiting to ambush. Like that, those big fish don't want to be fighting that current. I know that. And plus, it's like when you have white water, it's pretty tough to have good boat control.
Saturation, I think.
Yeah, so I know that I fished in a river system, the French, and fished right at the bottom of some current. And the guy I was fishing with called it a food elevator. He's like, we're just going to sit right here and cast up, and the fish are going to sit right here waiting for the food to get brought down to them. And within 2 casts, he had one on. Later on that trip, my younger brother caught his first muskie in that exact same spot, and then at the end of the trip, I caught one in that exact same spot. All different fish, and they were all sitting at that bottom of that current where it broke away, and there was some slack water. So,
I think
to answer your question, Edward, not too fast of current. The bottom of the current, I think, is what the guys are saying.
I focus if I'm fishing current. I'm concentrating in the slack water. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Like I'll fish the heavier current stuff, but I'm concentrating on the slack water areas for sure, 100%. I don't fish a lot of it though. Personally,
yeah, okay.
Minor current with a couple, like 2 or 3 spots that have a little bit, like a high current speed. But mostly everywhere I'm fishing is it has current, but it's slow.
Okay. And so, what about your drags? Are you running lockdown, Matt?
I keep my drag really tight on everything other than spinnerbaits, pretty much. Anything other than a single sidewash spinnerbait or bucktail. I don't know what it is. I've just learned over the years, for some reason, you got to have a lighter drag with those spinnerbaits. It's insane. Like sometimes I'll forget. Like I'll be running a stalker or like a crankbait, and then I'll switch over into the weed bite, and I'll throw a spinnerbait on. I'll get in there, and I'll forget. And I'll get ripped and I'll lose, and I'll be like, oh my God, I know better, right? Sometimes you just forget. Right. But if you got that drag set lighter with a spinnerbait, for some reason tend to stay pinned better. I guess it's the sidewash hooks. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree with Matt. I've had the same thing with trolling, like those big single hooks like that. If it's tight, I think it just like must just work its way when they're shaking and just rips a bigger hole and then comes out. Because like when it's loose, they seem to they tear a lot of line when they hit, but it just seems to go with them head shaking, and it's not so tight that it's ripping holes in the lips. I think they stay pinned way better.
Yeah,
with a lighter drag.
If I keep my drag tight with these things, I lose 50%.
I agree.
Softer rods help too.
Yeah.
Yes.
With single hook spinner baits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what's your favorite trolling rod?
You need 20. There's no favorite for me. I need at least 4 different actions, I would say.
I was just gonna say you should see my garage. That's a pretty loaded question too.
Shimano TDR, $45.
That's a good rod for the money. So is the 10-foot ugly stick for the money. Yeah.
I like those new 10-foot St. Croix, the 2-piece trolling rods.
Yeah, I've been running those.
They can handle more than most 10-foot rods. They got a good backbone, but at the same time, they got a softer tip. So I've been enjoying those over the last few years, for sure. Not solo though. They're terrible solo.
Yeah, it's hard to net with a 10-foot rod if you're solo.
For me, the rod thing too is so much about like where I'm at. Like where I started home in the spring, I'm running softer glass rods, 10-foot rods on the side, 7-8 footers in the back, like TDRs in the back, and 10-foot ugly stick glass rods on the side because I'm running small baits in the spring and lighter hooks, and like I need that. Now if I go and I'm running, say Georgian Bay or something, or Fish and Rock, I'm running like a 8-foot McGizzy, real heavier, a lot heavier glass rod, so they can handle it. Because like obviously if you go out and try to run that on the ugly stick, it's just going to fold in half, So for me, it's all about the lures that I'm running. But I will say, like, I like glass rods. I mean, I do use a lot of glass. I use some graphite, but I mainly just use glass. It just depends on how big a bait and how fast I'm going as far as how stiff it'll go. But I like some of those cheaper brands like Ugly Stick and Shimano. Those are nice for the money,
Oh yeah.
You definitely got to match the rod to the lure.
Yes.
Like Kevin was saying, like if your rod's already loaded and you're pulling a large marge or a plow and you get a 40-pounder hit that thing, there's no hook set.
Right.
So you got to match your rod to the same as the drag. I missed that question, but.
So speaking of matching your bait to your rod and pulling something like a plow or a large marge, what is the physically largest bait that you will regularly troll, and what is the hardest pulling bait that you troll?
Who wants to go first?
Who's starting?
Well,
you're first in line.
Large marge, so
large marge is definitely one of the hardest pulling baits.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably. I mean, for me, that I pull on a regular basis would probably be 10 inches. I feel like a lot of times you can go much bigger and again much smaller, but there's been so many big fish caught on 10-inch lures like that. I use a lot of 8s too where I'm at, and even 4s and 5s where I live, but in general, 10 inches is a great size bait. It just is. So I'd say that's the one I pull the most confidently. That's a decent size bait, but probably the hardest pulling, biggest thing that I have would be the large marge. I mean, the first time I put one out, he didn't warn me, and I let out about 25 feet, and I'm watching it whip back in the wash, and he's like, go ahead, engage the reel. And I click it in gear and about went over the back of the transom. I'm like, geez, like I had no idea that's the first time I ever put it in the water, but we were going over 5 miles an hour. When that lip bit, it was like, oh my God. I mean, it's crazy. It is.
The new Toddy Tickles bait. I'm not sure what model it is. That one you got there, Matt, with the big lip.
Beastmaster.
Yeah, that thing pulls like a bastard too.
So he makes a dredge lip, which is exactly what Matt is pulling down.
Oh wow!
And he's got some lead on there too, just for extra fun.
This one's got the mojo, man. Look, rock snot.
I like that.
Rock snot.
I like that.
I think we had a 50-incher eat that one. This
one's got 3 over 50 and a 49 so far.
Nice.
And Toddy Tickle's page and inbox just exploded. And so I'm happy to report that Catfish is trying to get on with us, guys.
Look at this thing.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
that's a cool bait. I got one
Wow.
of those too.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's Bailey Lambert makes that.
That thing's crazy.
How long is that thing? Like 16 inches or something?
16 inch. Well, here's the body punch right here. The River Slick.
Mm-hmm.
That's the 15, right?
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Bailey Lambert is a great guy. He's also part of the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter. Hopefully he's watching here tonight. I run a lot of his baits. He is definitely part of the I think we may have Catfish, guys, interrupting what I was saying to welcome Matt Catfish to the stream.
Yes, I made it.
There he is.
Yes.
You're
Almost. Technically challenged. Sorry, fellas.
Well,
That's all right.
Yeah.
the good news is all the guys in Bell River will not burn my boat and trailer down to the ground now. So we've managed to pull in a guy from that neck of the woods that is highly followed, and certainly we all appreciate the skill that you add to your fishing out there. So we've been asking a few questions, and Matt, why don't we go right to you on a question about what size of leader? Cheers to you, Kyle.
You know what? Leader wise, we're doing open water trolling out there, so I use blood knots. So I use like a 12 to 14 foot leader that I can reel up through the end guide right up into my spool. So the open water trolling, you're dealing with clear water. So I just go with 80-pound fluorocarbon, and it's about 12 to 14-inch leader. Now, my down rod and long rod, a down rod, obviously, I run about a 5-foot leader. I mean, the fish are aggressive. You want to try to keep that bait near the boat. So more like a 5-foot leader on that. And if you're new and you don't want to have a leader longer than your rod if you can't reel that leader blood knot through. Obviously, because it's going to be hard to net the fish if you got 14 foot of line on a 7-foot rod. So yeah, I ran into that problem before. Have you
tried that? Have you tried that Chinese finger trap thing where you stick the line inside the leader?
No. Starts with an H.
No. I've never done that. I just use a typical whatever they got on the box. It's like a double uni.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Ross does that, right? He sticks the leader, like he buys this Power Pro that you push it back.
It's hollow.
And you stick the fluorocarbon in, and then when it pulls back, it's like a Chinese finger trap, and it won't come out.
A lot of the saltwater guys use that knot you're talking about, Matt. That's a big saltwater thing.
Yep. Yeah, I've never tried that thing that Ross does. But this works good. Very little failure. The knot's a good knot. When you're dealing with, how expensive muskie baits are, you got to have something you got confidence in. And I've had very little failure on that knot. No failure, really.
So, Matt, you get to see a lot of guys out there trolling, and we started the ball rolling earlier with tell me about the common mistakes you see guys making out there while they're trolling. Is there something that stands out to you that you can now share with all the people joining us so they can stop making that mistake?
Yeah, you know what? I think number one, your drags. Everybody wonders, what about your drag? How much drag should I put on a bait? A drag, it's going to depend on, monofilament versus super braids. It's going to depend on your lure size and the amount of line you have out. And so if you're running, like say in the reservoirs early in the year, when you're running real small baits trying to mimic smaller bait fish, they're just going to lip that. And you cannot have a heavy drag on it. You've got to be able to hook up, and it's more like fighting, you know, a steelhead or something. Whereas if you're fishing up on the St. Lawrence Seaway, the 40-acre shoal, and you're running a 18-inch bait with 150, 200 feet of line out, you better lock that up. I mean, we're fishing for, you know, a world record size fish, and you got to rip that thing loose. So, you know, it really drag is probably the biggest one. And I like to look at, you know, how much line am I putting out? Is it monofilament versus super braid? And then the size of bait. You know, the bigger the bait, the heavier the drag. The more the line, the heavier the drag. And then certainly for small baits, you know, small baits, monofilament, super braid, you're going to want a lighter drag. So that's one of the things that you know, I really think that people need to, you know, it was one of the things I always wondered about. You know, you lose a couple fish and you're like, oh, the drag was too tight, it was too loose, you know. Well, you know, that gives you a little bit of general guidelines on how I like to set drags, you know.
Okay, great.
You know, I was going to add to what Catfish just said too, because I know someone asked that question earlier about drags, and we've been talking about them a little bit. And I'm kind of, my friends tease me about being like real anal about the drag. I mean, I'm pretty bad about it. But one thing to answer, just like for the guys in general, that works most of the time, because it covers a lot of what Catfish said. You could be running wireline, 4-inch baits, 10-inch baits, braid, mono. If you stand up, grab your rod that you're running, whatever bait it is. It could be that 10-inch bait or a 4-inch bait, but whatever bait it is, and whatever speed you're going, don't change anything. Just go back to that particular rod, grab that, let's say the side rod, let out about 10 or 15 feet, and just give it a rip like this with the clicker set. And if it rips out like you're reenacting the muskie strike, if you give it a rip and drag pulls out, your drag is good. If you give it like this and it pans out, then it's too loose. If you give it like this and it doesn't even click a notch, it's too tight. But you could do that for everything. So it adjusts for whatever bait or speed you're running. I do that all the time, every day. Every day.
So early, yeah. I fished with Mike Swan a few times, and he is always, you know, he says he's getting up to stretch his legs, but every time he goes back and he's checking those drags, and that's what he's doing, because he wants to make sure that based on the bait that we're running, that the drag has been adjusted for that bait.
And that's just a good way to reenact the strike, so you really know what it's like, you know, that rush. It works good for that, you know.
And turn your bait clicker on.
Yes, clicker's got to be on. Yeah.
Number one mistake, for sure. Number one mistake, 100%.
You know something? I also didn't. I never said like the mistake I see the most common mistake trollers make, but of course I troll a lot, and one of the things that it drives me crazy, like sometimes it makes it hard for me if I'm fishing with someone else. For me, one of the number one mistakes is people not watching their speed. So if you want to be going 4.5, if you want, let's say my goal where these baits perform best is 4.5, 4.6. Whoever's driving that boat better be watching that and keeping it there. And even if you want to be changing speed to trigger, then you got to do that too. But you still have to watch is the point. The biggest problem I have, someone gets in and they think it's 4.5 like they want to be. Then they turn downwind. And if I'm not driving, I look and now we're going 3.6. I'll like go postal. Like I can't handle. I'll be like, I just got to drive. So like the biggest mistake that I see it happen all the time, you have to watch. Like a hawk. I mean, you got to be on it, because if you want to be there, I'm messing with my throttle constantly to be there. Like, so that's a huge mistake. And like I say, even if you want to be changing the trigger, if you're not watching, you won't be changing either, except for maybe slowing down. Or if the wind gets at your back, then you're going too fast. So actually, the driver's responsibility of watching the speed you want to be at is a huge mistake. Followed by probably second most would be knowing how deep your baits actually are. You know, people always say, I always hear it thrown around lightly, lures are tools. Yeah, they are. But it's like, you know, you say that like if a guy was going to do a household project and you need a counter space built, the first thing you're going to do is measure that counter, and you see it's 60 inches. You go in and buy 60 inches of whatever you need. Well, with lures, people say they're tools and just throw them over the back. If you want them to be 15 down, you better know what 15 down is for that lure. Those two things are probably the two biggest that I see. Not knowing the depth and then keeping up with watching your speed.
Can I add to that?
Sure, yep.
On top of those things you mentioned, one thing that drives me crazy when I'm not driving is when people can't hit icons.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's because they're zoomed in too far. So the reaction time in reality can't keep up, or sorry, the electronics can't keep up with the reaction time in reality.
Yeah.
So people are just they're zoomed into 50 feet and they're turning left, right, trying to hit this thing. They're not looking at actually where they are in real life.
That's right.
In my mind, 50 feet is too zoomed in. Like the max I ever want to go is maybe the first 100 feet, because there's a couple you can get to where the reaction time is closer related to real time on your screen.
Yeah,
I agree.
You gotta keep your head up.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, and that's one of the reasons why I wish JP's was able to still be here, because he's answered questions for people who are like, oh, well, trolling is easy, and he was really nice about it, and he informed that group of people that sure, trolling could be easy if you don't catch fish, but if you want to be making sure you're doing the right speed and hitting the proper waypoints and making sure your bait is in that presentation zone for the whole time, I mean, it's a lot of work. And I keep 3 screens in sequence on my boat. I just use iPads, and I have one zoomed out far, one zoomed in medium, and one at 100. And that way I can see where I've been, where I'm going, and where I'm about to be. And that allows me to make sure that I'm hitting those spots that I've already worked so hard to find.
I feel like if you're really a serious troller, at the end of each day, your eyes should hurt a little bit. Also, your mind every day, a little bit,
And your wrist
and your wrist. Yeah, truthfully, I do.
I make like 200 to 300 waypoints every day. It's crazy. But you gotta remember, I'm not fishing like a sand bowl, right? Like where I fish, the structure and the bottom is so jagged and rigid. I really don't have a choice.
Right.
Like the auto chart live really helps. I'm not gonna lie. It shows me things that I've been missing for a long time. Yeah. But I mean, there's nothing can beat those waypoints. It's unbelievable. Like it's crazy. I have to cut my waypoint files up into different sections of the river and keep reloading them, deleting them, reloading, deleting as I move around, because my fish finder just can't handle enough. Do you guys run waypoints or no?
What's that?
What's that?
You guys run a lot of waypoints?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
For structure or just fish?
Both, but more. I mean, depends where I'm at. See, my problem is I'm too many places. But for home, a lot of it's just fish. But like for other places I go, and Canada and Chautauqua and stuff, a lot of it's structure. So it just depends where I'm at. Yeah. But I have a lot of waypoint shoes. I'll say that I've maxed out a few units, so like I definitely use them. I do.
I got like 25,000, and I'm like constantly splitting it up. But I rely on them big time. Like without them, obviously the fish icon is the best. But like without those waypoints, I couldn't troll stuff properly. It's impossible. Right. I can't see how it could be possibly doable.
Yeah, like where catfish is, the structure people might think it's different, but those waypoints are everything. You get a waypoint out there, now your day's set. Sometimes that's what you got. You find those fish on the contour lines, you get a waypoint down, and now you got something to fish. So you drop a lot of waypoints that way too, not structure, right, Matt? You agree with that?
Yeah. By the end of the day, your GPS should tell you a story. We've got a good, population of fish, so our sample size is good. And what you'll find is that almost invariably, under dirty water, the fish will be packed up. So when you hit a fish, you're probably all the fish you're going to catch for the day is going to be related to that one waypoint.
Wow.
There's fish feeding there. They're not. You're not just driving 10 miles in one direction trying to catch as many as you can. Usually, as soon as you hit a fish, you mark the waypoint. You know, you're fighting the fish. You start slowly turning the boat around. When you get it netted, the customers get some pictures. By then, I'm turned around trying to head back towards that waypoint.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're running boards that are out 100 feet each side, and then you have some boat traffic, you know, you don't want to get too far away from that area. And oftentimes, by laying down waypoints and paying attention to that kind of stuff, you'll notice all the fish, you know, certain days will hit going with the waves. Sometimes it's going parallel to the waves, and sometimes it's going into the waves. So it's really that job of the driver that Kevin was talking about is so imperative to pay attention to, you know, really where the hit's happening. And then, you know, what is the speed that you're going? And then also, you know, where are the baits stacked at in the water column? What baits are working better than the others? Because then with our baits, you know, we may be running 10 to 12 rods. So we can then reproduce those things on the other side of the boat and sometimes, you know, enhance our productivity that way. And when you have 4 to 5 guests, you're all trying to get them a couple fish each. That's very important.
That reminds me. That sounds like and kind of reminds me of fishing for king salmon in Lake Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It is. It is like it. It is.
But that's where I fish is nothing like that whatsoever.
Right. Right.
Like, I mean,
we have 1 rod each. That doesn't help.
No.
And there's so much structure. It's just insane and weeds, right? Like, but I do find fish like back to that point, catfish. If I get a fish on one spot, I'll turn around and get another fish off it. But it's not just like it's usually a piece of structure, right? Like it's a hard sharp drop on a rock or like a weed point or something. Yeah. As opposed to watercolor change.
You guys would love this. New Jersey, I used to live out that way, and New Jersey it was unlimited rods.
Wow.
Oh yeah, you talk about Rodzilla.
I bet. I bet.
that must have been crazy. So you know, as all you guys know, the reason why I was able to put on this show and get all you guys together was because over the last few years I've made friends with Todd Dowell and spent a number of days fishing with him, and so he just popped on to say hi here. And Todd, why don't you tell us? He's got some good feedback. Why don't you tell us how people can get some of these beautiful baits, Todd?
A lot of feedback.
Oh yeah. Oh well.
It makes me want to do the Roboto.
and oh boy, and back off I'm afraid we can't hear you, Todd. Something seems to be wrong with your mic. But thanks.
You don't know sign language?
He, you know what? If anyone knew sign language, it would probably be Todd.
I knew what he said. It was saying "Dono money gato misto roboto dono." That's what I heard.
All
too
right.
funny.
Well, it was worth a try. And so Todd did just send me a message to let me know that if anyone is looking for a helibard, he does have a couple up tonight. I think Danny Colley put them up for him. And so Todd, thanks for helping us out tonight. And if anyone wants to try and support Todd, I guess he's got some baits up there. So see if you can get yourself one. So let's see if we can get a question. So we talked about bait fish earlier in Cisco. And so somebody asked, and I believe here it is, Marlon. So Marlon asked, is there such a thing as too much bait? And if so, how would you approach that scenario?
Yes. Yes, there is.
I mean, you want to just start catfish and go around now that we're all here, I guess. Other than we can, well, no JP, but you want to start with catfish and just go around?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to think. I've been on many lakes. I've fished east of Montreal over to Winnipeg and from Loch Sewell down to West Virginia. And there's definitely times that I've run into areas that I thought there was too much bait. But I just fish the edges because the muskies are going to be around it anyways. So that'd be my answer.
Yeah,
Kyle?
I agree. Like, yeah, there's like on Georgian Bay, you'll get some of the river systems in the fall that just it's black with bait fish later in the year, and you just can't compete unless you're literally running a lure that mimics exactly what those fish are doing. And there's some summer spot like alewives used to come into some of the rivers when we were younger, and we couldn't catch a thing unless our bait looked exactly like an alewife, and we moved it exactly like they would break the surface in the evening. So we'd have to mimic that perfectly and time it perfectly in order to catch fish. If you weren't doing that, you weren't contacting fish at all. But other than that, I would say, yeah, I in most cases, I want to be around it, but not in it because it's too hard to compete.
Anything to add to that, Matt?
I'd say if you got the right bait that the muskies are actually feeding on, you can't have too much, in my opinion. If you're, if you know your muskies are feeding on Cisco and you got Cisco around, you're good to go. But you have to know that it's Cisco. Sometimes people don't know how to use their fish finders properly. They're marking bait, and it could be perch, it could be walleye, it could be smallmouth, right? But if I have Cisco, I'm not leaving it usually. I'm pretty confident around it. Doesn't matter how much is there, more the better.
Yeah, Cisco I think is a different story than a lot of other bait, like
shad.
Yeah,
like for me,
it's harder to fish around.
Yeah, it's like for me, like Catfish said, if the bait's thick, like I might try to troll the edge of it just to get out of it a little bit. But then, like how Matt was saying, Cisco's and that, I've never had a problem where I was like snagging them. But in shad lakes, I have, where it's so thick that you actually can't troll effectively. And it's actually, I've had tangles and everything else because you're reeling the bait and there's shad on a couple different trebles. Well, if it gets like that and I can't even get outside the school, that's time to jig. That's Bondi time for me. If I can't even troll through it without keeping the lines clean, I'll start jigging. But other than that, I try to just get on the outskirts if it's shad. That's the only time I've had a problem with snagging it is in shad.
So after catching a fish, how long do you stay around in the same area?
For me, this open water fishing, the fish I catch are there for a reason because the bait's there. And basically, I usually stick it out, try to catch a couple feeding windows. If, early summer through the summertime, you're going to have multiple feeding times and, we'll stick it out through a couple of them. But generally, we're pretty successful that way. Whereas, other lakes I've fished, might fish it for a while, make sure you're being very thorough with it, working the inside structure, and then outside, and then just come back to it later. I mean, if there's bait there, could be fish there. It's about hitting a window.
For where I fish, I just reel in the lines and go in. The day's done. Success. Let's go drink.
Oh shit!
What do you mean? If you catch one?
Yeah. Game over. We did it. Celebrate. No, I'll generally fish the area a little longer, but I mean, the density of fish where I'm at is so low. It's like it's all about covering water where I'm at, so you can't waste too much time where you've caught a fish. Sometimes they'll hang out in packs, but like on Nipissing for sure, but on Georgian Bay, like odds are there's not more than one fish there.
Early season when they're coming off swamp, a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
but like midsummer, yeah, it's few and far between for sure out there. But you got whales, so it's worth it.
Yeah, like if for me on like higher density waters that I'm on, it's if I catch a fish and whatever the screen looks like at that point, and I'm working that area after I catch it, and I'm still marking hooks and baits there, as long as I get no kind of major weather change, I'll stay on it for as long as I can and try to get as many fish as I can. But if whatever those ingredients were changed and I work at a few passes and all of a sudden I'm not seeing the hooks or the bait thins out or whatever, the wind switches and all of a sudden my screen gets lousy, I'll get out of there after making a few passes. But as long as I got stuff around to work and my screen's keeping me interested on an action or higher density body of water, sometimes I pound a stretch, my pass all day, all day.
So what about scent? Do any of you guys ever add scent?
No.
No.
I do the rubber baits when I'm casting, but not so much trolling.
The only thing I've ever put on baits is WD-40. That's about it.
It's too bad JP isn't here because I used to work with him at a fishing lodge up on the French River, and the walleye guys would come in and they clean all their fish, and JP would take all his baits and throw them in the bucket with all the carcass and let them get that walleye smell on them.
I mean, it can't. I don't think it can hurt.
I don't think so either.
Marinating them. Marinating walleye.
And so somebody asked, how do you choose your size of bait?
You know what? If you got multiple lines, then I like running multiple sizes. From the start of the year to the finish. Generally, try some small and some big and see what they want. Sometimes, the big baits seem to get bigger fish for me out on St. Clair. But definitely, as the year progresses, larger baits seem to work better, especially in the late fall. So I think it's always, you want to try to keep them honest and try a little of everything until you have a pattern.
Yeah, I'll go back to what Kevin said earlier. Like I start at 10 inches and go from there. But if I have options and I have a few people in the boat, then yeah, I'm mixing it up. I'll get a 10. My longer line will typically be a smaller bait, and my deep bait will generally be a larger bait.
And when you're trolling in the bay, Kyle or Matt, what's the slowest speed? You guys are trying to cover water. You guys are trying to get to those low density fish and make sure you get your bait in front of them. Are you ever going 3 miles an hour?
I am for
really
sure.
late.
Yeah, late.
Yeah.
Or depending on the current conditions, like if you got a cold front, I'll size down and slow down and let the fish tell me, like, I'm not going to keep doing 5.5 mile an hour and the rods aren't going off. You got to make adjustments, especially after you have a 2-day cold front. You got to make adjustments, or you're just going to keep getting what you got.
Yeah, I go too fast all the time, but it works for me because I'm covering water. The one thing I'll do is if I got guests in the boat that are like younger guys or younger girls, I'll tell them to pick up the rod and jerk it. Get the paws in there.
Yeah.
I'll grab that rod and just jerk that jake all day. Never stop.
You can do that too with your throttle, right?
It works.
A lot of
And
times.
so are you running a rod leash for those folks?
Yeah, always. Yeah,
always.
All right. So Bonner is asking if you can elaborate on the WD-40 comment. He's hoping for more of a secret in that you're hiding in there.
I mean, a lot of some of the old timers that I know used to do that. I'd see them with the giant bottle of WD-40. They'd spray their lures with it. So at first I was doing it just kind of as a joke. Like I'm like, I got the WD-40, we're struggling. I'll spray the baits. Well, I remember saying this when I used to pick up new baits that were freshly painted. They smell like paint. And sometimes just that, I don't know if it just masks something or what, But I remember that, and that's what led me to doing the WD-40. I kind of brought it back in after that, and some of the old timers I fished with it used it, but it's got fish oil in it. So it leaves like a little slick off them, but plus you can spray the bait and you smell it, and it still has that scent. So I've used it trolling and definitely seen it work. Now, I don't know if they wouldn't have hit it without it, but I really saw it when I started spraying like bucktails, especially like hair ones, like marabou and hair with WD-40. And I know you guys have seen it too when you're casting. Fish follow up and you see them doing something, but it's like they're just tasting it almost. But I've seen it when we casted with the blades with the WD-40. I got to really see it work. You know, you'd pick up the speed and engage a little bit, and like you'd see them nose up on it and they just eat it. So I don't do it all the time now, but that's the only thing I ever used, and I've used it trolling and casting. And it put it this way, it didn't hurt. Definitely didn't hurt, you know?
Okay. And so have any of you guys ever used the revival tanks that are so popular and I believe invented in the Lake St. Clair area?
Yeah, both my boats have them. They seem to work good. I a couple hinters on it. One, sure you have a good outflow, and I like to change the water, especially in the summertime. Drain it every time. So, you know, I've got a pump that goes off the bottom of the boat, sucks in the coolest water I can get. That way, when we get the fish in there to rehab them, you know, they seem to do better. The also with that is those big lids are awesome because we'll net the fish, pick them right out of the water, drop them right in the tank. So the fish never hits the floor. He's still in the net. Then grab your hook outs or your cutters or whatever and cut them, roll them out of the bag. So they're hardly out of the water except for the pictures once they're rehabbed, and then you can put them right back in, make sure they're good to go, you know, fondle them a little bit and then let them go. So they work great. Couldn't imagine not having them.
Is there any issues with having, like, I don't know what the size limit is there. Like, what's the minimum size limit on St. Clair?
You know, I think it's 42 and 44, but you know, nobody really harasses us about that. You know, we bring everyone in and put them right in the live well. You know, unhook them and let them go. So I think the M&R, the DNR, they get what we're doing. You know, they're good people. They understand we're trying to make a living and we're taking care of our resource. That, you know, we're not harvesting any fish. We're trying to take the best care we can. And most of us guys out here are parts, you know, Muskies Canada, Muskies Inc., the MOMC, our Michigan Ontario Muskie Club. And you know, the future of the fishery is our future. So they don't really say anything to us about that stuff.
Yeah, from my experience with guys like Joe Rennie and Brian Denemy, who manufacture these tanks, and I'm sure there's others who I'm leaving out, but those guys make these tanks, and the intent really is to take good care of the muskie. So,
hey, one other thing to say about the tanks, the lower in the boat you put them, the less they're gonna, you know, beat up the fish. Because that out on Lake St. Clair, you're always rocking and rolling a little bit. The lower to the boat, and if you can make it lengthwise, so that tank is heading up the middle of the boat or up one of the sides instead of across the boat, it seems like it's a lot more forgiving on the fish.
Matt's just finger blasting his phone here.
Yeah. I have no idea.
And we just went from PG-13 to
you guys hear that?
yeah, so there appears to be a little bit of static, and I think my producer's trying to figure out where it's coming from.
Matt O'Brien, he breaks everything.
I thought we were about to go to Mr. Roboto adult version there for a second. I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, wow. Oh, man. That was some interesting sounds for sure.
Leave it to Matt to break it.
All right, so here we go. These guys figure you're loose enough to get some of the tough questions. What was the biggest fish for you guys this past season? And we're going to go to Kevin first.
Oh, man. For me, it wasn't too big, guys. It was, believe it or not, it was 49.5 was my biggest this year. It was pretty hard, I guess. I guess it showed me not go. I was stuck in Ohio, PA, and New York this season. So that's caught a lot. It was the most fish I ever caught in the year. But lots of nice ones, but nothing really big, you know. Got some, nothing over like 35 pounds. Let's put it that way. That was the biggest.
All right, Kyle, wow us.
I had a tough season too. Just my wife was pregnant, so I couldn't travel a lot. I did manage a 54.5, but other than that, it was probably in the last 5 years my worst season by far.
Yeah, I mean, 54.5 sounds horrible. I'm sorry for your season.
Yeah.
Everyone gets lucky.
Yeah. It looks like Catfish might be a little bit frozen right now.
There he is.
Oh, there you go.
I'm there.
All right. So, Catfish, your biggest fish this season, sir.
Well, I got a fish story for you. I had one of my best clients in the boat. And in the morning, I got a 53 on one of the Canadian rover, trolling a rover. I got a 53, and that happened to be my longest. At the end of the day, I got this guy casting. He didn't cast much, but I got him casting, and he got a 48.5-inch hybrid. So I got my biggest hybrid I've ever had in the boat, and the biggest muskie of the year in the same day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think we ended up with like 12 or 15 over 50, and but 53 was the longest that we got.
Okay.
Well, a quick shout out to Landry, who makes the rover, and yet again is a member of the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter. We've tried to get Todd to join the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter, and he went R-rated on me. But anyone who does want to join the Toddy Tickle page, there are some questions. It's a private page in order to get on, but you have an exclusive invite tonight. If you answer round table to those questions, Todd will escort you right onto the page. So let's see, 50-pound fact or fiction. Is there 50-pounders roaming out there, guys?
Oh yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
For sure.
60-pounder would be the main question, but I think they're there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta agree. The if you fished enough like G Bay and Green Bay, if you fished Lake of the Woods, St. Lawrence, the west end of the St. Lawrence, and then it's Mille Lacs. I've got my two biggest ones out of Mille Lacs. So there's some giant fish, Vermilion, Eagle. So I definitely think 50. There's some fish out there that size, and I think they're only one meal away from 60. So.
Yeah, that's true. In the fall, some of those big fish you catch in June and July, you just know are going to be absolute slobs.
Mm-hmm.
I think all these guys here have 50-pounders.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I got real close once, but didn't crack 50, even though I tried all three measuring weight calculator pages.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I tried them all, but it didn't quite get there. And so Goldberg. Oh wait, there's Matt. You're back, sir.
Oh my
Welcome
God!
back.
Did you guys hear that?
Oh yeah, we heard it.
Oh my God! My phone died.
Yeah, It sounded like it.
Fuck me.
Okay. Well,
Oh man.
Well, I'm glad the wall of baits is back though.
Yeah.
Right.
And
What
so
about
Brian,
what about my artwork? Come on now.
yeah, listen, your hotel artwork is very lovely, but it's not as great as looking at a Toddy Tickle Beastmaster that's
No,
caught
it's not.
350 inches.
No, it's not.
And so Brian Denemy just advised me that that our Canadian Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests is now using those same revival tanks.
Mm.
And so there's a glowing. So there's a really cool story behind this bait, and Matt, we should let you tell it.
My kid painted or drew this with Sharpies on a piece of paper, and Todd Dow made it for me. Nice, eh?
That's sweet.
Yeah,
no fishman would ever think about making that color, but a 7-year-old all day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he called it the Murder Hornet.
That's
Cool name,
awesome.
too.
It's gonna work.
Yeah, there's going to be about 4 bait makers now that'll have those up in the next week.
Oh yeah.
With that same pattern that they can send your son a small tribute of $20 per bait that they make.
We're gonna catch him on it. I didn't mean to cut you off though. Go ahead with your question.
No, I just wanted to point out I got some really good information from one of the executives in the Bell River Muskies Canada chapter, just letting us know that that they see it as a very good thing for us to be using those revival tanks, and especially like yourself, the guys who are out there making a living with these fish. You can't stop fishing in July. You still have to feed your kids and pay the bills, and so you have to find a way in order to, in water that gets warm, you have to find a way to keep those fish safe. Now, maybe the upper French and some of the deeper lakes, they're not getting 80 degrees, and if they are, it's only the top 10 inches of water. But for the Lake St. Clair guys, those revival tanks are a way of life.
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea. I was just worried about having a 47-incher and then getting pulled over, right?
Yeah, and I think that any MNRF guy that comes along is going to see that, based on the fact that we have several $1,000s worth of muskie baits alone, that we're dedicated anglers to the sport fishing and research and support of these fish, and certainly that's one of the areas where a Muskies Canada badge on your boat or your tackle box comes in handy. They know that you're a conservationalist, and so whereas you're not allowed to possess a 42-inch fish, if you're trying to make it so that the fish survives and breeds and adds good quality genes to the gene pool, we'll I'll throw in. We'll start a GoFundMe and get you the best lawyers in town. There's no way that anyone's going to give you a hard time for that. I know one of the past chairman of Bell River had a fish that wasn't going to survive, and he took off his jacket, threw on a life jacket, hopped in the water, and swam with the fish. The guy's name is Shane Hodgson. Swam with the fish for over 30 minutes until the fish finally had enough energy to get up and go, and he knew it was going to survive. And so we're willing to go to some pretty extreme effort to make sure these fish are taken care of, and I believe in the MNRF that will take care of us in return. So somebody wants to know Goldberg's official muskie number for the past season. And fortunately for Goldberg, he wasn't there to hear the question, so he maybe
What's that?
30,000.
Well,
what is your official counter for the past season that made its way into your bag?
433 this year.
Oh my god!
What about
10 lifetimes on Georgian Bay.
You must have gave him a run for his money, though, eh?
No, I had a tough year with Canada being closed. I think I was at 225.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, Yeah, it was. I'm used to. We're usually up around 400 to 600, but not this year. It was tough.
Crazy.
I think the highlight of my year was I had a 98 fish boated week. That was my best. That set the tone. That was a pretty good week.
That's a good week.
Yeah.
That was my last 3 seasons combined that week.
Yeah. Fortunately, where I live, though, like some of the lakes we got have just been really good lately, you know. And like I said, this year I just fished Ohio and PA and New York. So I didn't go, like when I go on trips, I typically go on tough places. I like to go where the bites, you know, low density. Like probably my favorite place I've ever trolled is the Georgian Bay. Like I love it there. But I like low density when I'm going on a trip. At home. Like I'm a little spoiled with what we got. But it's funny, I got to see that this year. Without doing those trips, I accumulated more fish, you know. That and the COVID year as well. I mean, there was 8 weeks where we weren't working. I was fishing 3 and 4 days a week some of those weeks, you know. So.
And so another question came in from Peter Levick, and he wants to know, trolling multiple lines and not being able to slow down when a rod goes off, how does it affect your release?
Yeah. Basically we do slow the boat down because we got to keep the board spread. And what the first thing you're going to do is hit your waypoint, obviously. So first mate or yourself's going to get the rod out, hand it to the client or whoever. Let the rod run. Then you're going to spread your lines. So whatever board rod it went off. So if you got 3 board rods on one line, you want to spread the other lines out to give you a big gap to bring it in. At that point in time, probably slow the boat down to about 2 to 2.5 miles an hour. Now, the only thing that's going to sink on that, our lake is relatively shallow. So if you're running big bucktails, they might hit the bottom. But other than that, you want to keep the baits off the bottom. We run a lot of weight, even if it's light, to pick up weeds. So we just slow it down. The fight's a little longer than general, but that's what's great about the revival tank. Once you get them in there, you let them set. You can hit them with a bunch of water, and once they're good to go. So I think it's a pretty good tactic, but that's why we don't shut the boat down, because the boards will collapse into the boat and your baits are all going to hit the bottom. There was a day in December we were running, hooked into a fish, slowed the boat down, another rod went off, grabbed that rod, a customer's bringing it in, and a third rod went off. So sometimes it buys you some fish slowing the boat down as well, for keeping in gear.
Interesting. So I run the big boards on my boat. I've been lucky enough to be able to set my boat up the way I want. I have something called an iTroll. You guys talked earlier about adjusting your speed and maintaining your speed. So I have a really cool device that allows me to punch in exactly to 10% to 0.1% of my throttle power on either of my motors. And I have a little kick plate at the back that allows me to kick my boat. Mostly I use it for big salmon. So if I'm trolling at, say, 2.2 miles an hour, I kick that button and it drops me to 1.1 miles per hour. I kick it again, it puts me in neutral. And so it allows me to fight a big salmon. But I have used it on muskie before. And so when I'm running the big boards out to the side, and I know some of you guys do that. Do you ever run a cheater line, especially when you're in one rod water?
I don't, but
you mean like
Matt probably does.
I've done it for salmon, but I can't figure it out really for muskie.
Like a slider?
No,
Yeah.
So the way I run my cheater lines is if I'm using the big board, what I'll do is I will let out a release clip, say 50 feet on my line, and run a 30-foot hand line off of the main line using a giant snap swivel or one of the Husky Muskie leaders, and then if it does get hit, it pops that clip and slides down the bottom like a slider at that point. But
yeah, we just call them sliders. That's all. I use them at St. Clair, and I'm sure that's what Matt's thinking. We use those there all the time. At least we used to. I don't know anymore if you still do, but I used to.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't count as an extra rod.
Not if you have
hook
not
points.
if you have less than four or less hooks on it. So if you're running a believer, for instance, take off the middle hook, like you're doing a burger rig, and then run a big spoon or an inline spinner or another believer with only 2 hooks, and it's attached to your same fishing rod. So much like running a slider spoon on a salmon rig.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's still one rod.
I should do that.
I know before St. Clair went to 2 lines a person in Canada, before they did that, we used to run 1 line on the main line and a slider line like you're talking. We call them slider, but a 30, 40-foot mono, 50-pound mono, big game or something with a bait on it. But we just made sure we had 2 hooks on the main line and 2 hooks on the slider line. That's all. So as long as you kept it to 4 hooks, you were good.
See this thing? It's like a fly, okay?
Or it is a fly.
No, well,
it's just like one.
Oh my God.
This is new to me, okay? My buddy, I saw him up at the wall. I'm like, what is that? What do you do? Like, what's going on? He had this thing just hooked on above his barrel swivel with a snap and like 4 feet of line. So he had like a crankbait on, and then this thing was linked up right above his leader.
Yeah.
And he was running that on the same line. So it's kind of the same idea. I haven't tried it yet, but he gave it to me.
So what do you attach the cheater line to on the boat?
So it's not attached to the boat. You let it slide. So when I'm running the big boards, I just put like a Scotty release clip on my line as I'm letting it out, and then I take 30 feet of.
Oh, I see. So when you get to the clip, you got a hand.
Yeah, and so what happens is the clip ends up popping off and sliding down, and then what happens is the bait will then the fish and the bait will then slide down to my main line and eventually get caught there. So it sets the hook by popping off the slider. And then the problem is now you've got 30 feet of line out past your rod. And so that lies where, like, holy, do we want to do this or not? And so for me, when I learned to do it, it was mostly just to figure out what the fish wanted. Especially, I ended up fishing a lot solo. So I was running 1 rod in 1 rod waters all by myself. And I needed to know if they wanted white or black or perch or what. And so I just used it to help teach me what was what. And once if it would go off, then I know I'm too deep. I need to come up higher and fish like that. But Kyle, I'll give you an open invitation to come on my boat, and I'll show you what I do, and then you can just let me mark a whole bunch of waypoints, and we'll call it even.
I'm down.
Ryan, just a quick tidbit. The hook points, if you look at Ziggy's, Loki's, all those, you can slide the middle one off, and that was the whole reason why they did that, was because back when it was 1 rod per person in Canada on St. Clair, all of us ran sliders almost on every other line, so that was big. Another thing about the sliders is it gets to be a lot of fun if they hit your main line and it snaps both releases. So now you're dragging your slider, and sometimes that slider will start getting stuck in the mud, and you'll think you'll have a giant on. And in some cases, you'll have a fish, hit both rods, and that makes for a real good time. So that's something. And as far as that fly that Matt showed, I've had it where the fish were hitting our sinkers. So we'd put a treble on the sinker, and it might buy you a couple fish a year. But either way, those are some slider tidbits. I'm putting that in. I'm not charging you guys for that. I'm just throwing it in.
They also love weed hooks. They love weed hooks. They'll hit those weed hooks too, huh, Matt?
That's absolutely right.
Uh-huh.
Steve Gallagher, if any of you guys know his name. Great fisherman. He gave me that. You know what he told me? He said nothing's ever eat it, but he does it anyways. I'm gonna try it.
Flasher. It's a flasher.
It's a flasher.
It's got a hook on it, right?
It'd work behind a spin doctor for sure.
It's like
for salmon.
Long, right?
You better put hooks on that spin doctor.
So you got a crankbait on, though. It's pounding like this, right? This thing's going like that.
Oh yeah.
I think it's gonna work.
Goldberg, Kevin, didn't one of your buddies get? I can't remember which one.
Yeah,
got a double header with that slider. St. Clair. Who was that?
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was.
Bond.
Was it Bond?
Yeah, Bond. With the you mean you're talking about with the slider where both went?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a slider and the main line go, and I don't remember what it was, but one was like 49 and the other one was 48 or 7 or something, like two big fish, like might have been a 50 and something actually. But I mean, that's a lot of fish to be bringing in on one line. Pretty crazy. It was Bond.
Nice.
Yeah, it was Bond.
Double header, one rod.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And
so somebody, our friend Anvar, I've had the opportunity to spend some time with Anvar, and he's an aggressive, hardcore muskie guy. He wants to know how much you slow down at night. So if you were going 4 miles an hour during the day, and now it's dead of night, how much are you slowing down?
I slow down 100%. I fish a lot at night where I'm at, and over the years, it's hard to do. Like it took me a long time to get confidence in doing it because I'm so used to covering water and wanted to fly around for active fish, but over the last few years, it's paid off for me big time. Like I'll slow down to, like for me, I'm going like 3 miles an hour slowing down. So I don't know if that's pretty slow for me. But I'll go like when it's pitch dark, say like a new moon in July or new moon in August, I'll slow down to like 3 miles an hour pitch dark.
And so what percentage of a reduction would that be? Are you coming down from 5?
Yeah. Like I'm going 5 like all the time.
Right. So you're coming down at least 30%.
Yeah. Like I'll slowly back off in the throttle, like, you know, as it's getting darker. And I think my baits are getting deeper too. I'm trolling a lot of swim baits, so they're sinking baits too, right? So they're getting that down a little bit deeper.
Anyone else have any input on that?
I generally slow down at least a mile per hour, depending on, you know, if I'm fishing the summer, I'm going like sometimes 6 miles an hour. And I'll slow down to 5 or 4.5 in the fall. I don't do as much night fishing, but if I'm going like 3.5 during the day, then I'll go 2.5 into the dark.
Yeah,
definitely slow down though.
Yeah, I'm more like in the summertime about a half mile an hour. Most of the time I'm trolling 3.6 to 4.2, and at night I'm running somewhere around 3.5. Seems to be the most productive for me. That's as long as you got some visibility in the water. If it's dirty water, the night bite doesn't seem as good where I'm at.
And for me, I was going to say bait-wise, I haven't done much anything under 2.5 and not much over 3.5. So depending on baits or whatever, that's a kind of a wide range, but it's a lot of 2.6, 2.8, 3, a lot of that. And then if I'm trolling faster and running bigger baits, I have caught them as fast as maybe 3.8 or 4, but I've never caught anything faster than that at night. But I often am going around 2.5 to 3 a lot of the time.
I have caught a lot at night going 5 miles an hour tons just because I didn't know any better 5-8 years ago. You know what I mean? Like I just kept going. I was catching them 5 miles an hour for the day, so I just kept going 5 miles. It works. You'll see 100%. Yep.
I just never try it, you know. I mean, I remember being at St. Clair doing 5 and then doing, like Kyle said, dropping it a mile. I remember one trip in particular, and we were doing good around 4. But for most of the time, most of the night fishing I do, it's probably just a habit thing. I'm normally going slower, you know. But like Matt said, I've never tried to go on that fast. I've never gone 5 at night. I just haven't, you know.
I had an experience this year. I was fishing on Lake X and Frank Thurston was in a different boat than me, but we were in this small water system, and we were constantly passing each other. And he was murdering it. The guy was cleaning house, and it was time to go in. And so we went in. We made some supper, and I said, I must be doing something wrong. And he goes, "Why don't you try slowing down?" And I said, "Well, I'll try that tomorrow." He goes, "Why don't you go try it right now?" And so out we went at 10 o'clock at night, and I forgot my headlamp. And so I was out there, and I hooked up to a really beautiful fish. I slowed it down to 2.6 miles an hour. There was a little bit of a moon out. It was the coolest night fish I'd ever caught. And thankfully, I didn't have a light because I had to call the other boat over to help me. And they ended up getting a nice picture for me. And so when I fish at night, I now take Frank Thurston's advice, and I kill that throttle pretty substantially.
Can't hurt. Gives them a little more time to find it, for sure.
So unrelated to fishing, I feel left out of the chew department, and so I wonder, you guys all seem to spit your chew into like a beer bottle. Have you ever accidentally confused your fresh beer bottle for your chew beer bottle?
Absolutely.
On purpose.
That's how you become a real man, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Matt just spills it all over your carpet.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible, actually. All right, so as we close out here, and we haven't dropped below 100 viewers in over 2 hours, and so that's I've been a part of many broadcasts and watched many broadcasts, and I can tell you guys that 830 people have already watched part of this episode, and so I imagine we're going to end up having a lot of viewers over the next days and weeks. And so when everyone's going to start hitting the water in my area is going to be June 5th, and they're going to be out there. And I mean, assuming I'm right, it's June 5th. I know last year was June 5th. But where are they going to want to target? What size of bait are they doing, and how fast are they going? In general parameters, we don't expect your waypoints, but can we assume that it's going to be pretty standard to other years, or what are your thoughts? Why don't we start with Kevin? We'll go around clockwise.
Okay, I'm gonna say for where you're at, I'd be going speed wise probably 4.2 to 4.6. Lure choice, I'd be doing some sort of jointed square lip bait over top of the new emergent weeds, and also maybe a spinner bait. And I'd probably be targeting the northernmost creek arm or some kind of northern bay or something that has weeds that gets the most sun exposure. You're chasing water temp. So I'd be looking for warmer water close to spawning grounds that has any type of good bay or anything like that they'd use for spawning, that has good weed growth and enough depth that you could actually troll over the weeds. That's where I'd be starting.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Kevin. I was going to say you got to chase those water temps. Like I'm definitely looking for the warmest water possible, and starting in and working my way out. If there's good weed growth, I'm trolling inline bucktails. I do a lot of casting in the spring, so I can't speak too much of the trolling. If I am trolling, I'm doing more off the structure. But yeah, my speeds, again, depending on the water temps, I'll start at about 3.5 tops, maybe 4.2. But I'm keeping my baits high no matter where I am in the top 10 feet of water.
And Matt, will you be driving his boat? So will you guys be in the same boat?
Ideally, yeah, but probably not. We gotta work and make some money, right? I personally would be, everything they said 100% works. But one thing you want to keep in mind is Kyle kind of alluded to it. is in those back bays, especially where I'm at. I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but a lot of the spawning bays where I am have deep basins in them too. So they're way off the main channel, way off the main lake, and they'll be 5-10 degrees warmer, but they'll still have an open water basin. So I definitely troll that open water basin inside those deep spawning bays, shallow spawning bays with a deep basin. I'm covering the water like sometimes it's not even more than 4 or 5 cast lengths wide, but it's 45, 60 feet in the middle, right? So I'm trolling down with my bait down 1 or 2 feet over 60 feet of water in the warm water on top and doing really well.
Okay. And catfish in your area, what are guys going to be focusing on when they get out there in June?
You know, it's not unlike anywhere else. Lake Huron's going to be pumping in real cold water. It's deep, cold, and clear. It's going to be pumping in the North Shore, so your bays are going to be best. And you know, the Thames area is always a real good area. You just got to find what depth the bait's in. So hopefully the fish are off the spawn, and they're going to be following bait. So it's pretty much. I like trolling inside out, you know, starting deep and going in shallow, and then just, you know, zigzag and come right back out and just try to find what depth the bait's at. Now, as we were talking earlier, we can run multiple lines. So I always run one big bait, and I'll probably run 2 or 3 smaller baits just because they're probably feeding a lot on shad and perch and stuff like that. But I want to keep them honest with a few big baits. So if you look on the American side, the Selfridge area, that doesn't get a lot of current coming in when you get up near Salt Creek and in tight Selfridge. So then the Crocker area is like a giant back eddy, and that warms up pretty good. It's got some dirty water coming in. So those are really good areas, you know, to hit. And like the guy said, the Crocker area and the Selfridge area, you're looking for the weed growth, the outside weed edges. And, you know, you can just throw a variety, you know, keep them honest with your bait selection. We're always trolling generally high because our body of water is pretty shallow.
One thing I'd like to add to that too is I run a lot of single hook sidewash spinner baits that time of year, like early season, because I'm fishing. It's different than St. Clair, right? Like it's probably a lot like what Kevin fishes, where it's really narrow creek arms and back bays, where like I'm fishing weeds and I'm fishing open water at the same time, right? So I need to have a bait on where I can slide up and go over a weed bed for 100 yards, then slide back out into 60 feet of water. It's only one cast length away. You know what I mean? As opposed to like trying to like run one bait out in the open water and then go into the weeds, run something else. I'll just run a single hook spinner bait in and out all day, right? It works. Like I'll get some in the weeds, I'll get some out in the middle.
All right, guys. As we wrap this up, I want to make sure to give you guys a plug and let guys know, guys and lady muskie hunters out there as well, know who is available to offer guide service and how they find you. I'm going to post those links up in the comments below. But for everyone that is offering guide service, can you tell them where they find you? Is it just Facebook, or do you have a website? So please let us know that.
Who's going first? Me?
Well, we'll start with you, Kyle.
The easiest way to find me is sloblandcharters.ca or .com. All my info's on there, and you can contact me. You can phone me, text me, or email me.
We'll get that posted up. Matt?
For me, it's probably social media. Just look up Matt O'Brien on Facebook, and my Instagram handle is Massive Esox. Massive Esox.
Makes sense. We'll get that posted up into the comments as well. Catfish, can people hire you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can. I will say, though, some of my best friends are, you know, Canadian guides over there, and you've got lots of really good fishermen on the Canadian side. But if you want to come over and visit me, I'm at www.whopperstoppermuskiecharters.com, and I also have a Facebook page. I'd love to take you out, but there's a lot of great guides on the Canadian side. They're good friends of mine, and they'll take care of you out there. And I just want a special thanks to Muskies Canada for doing all their research, and Muskies Inc. and our MLC that take good care of the lake and our fisheries, as well as our DNR and MNR.
Well, I appreciate that, Catfish, and I'm going to give a plug to Muskies Canada as soon as I'm done asking Kevin if there's any way people can bribe you and get you to take them out. Are you ever available for customers, Kevin?
No, I just fish. That's it. You know, I mean, I fish a lot, but I'm always fish. I fish with my wife the most, but I'm not available for that. Just like to fish. That's it.
Yeah. Well, 40 Creek and Kokanee I'll deliver that to your wife and make her make you take me out one day.
And we can do that. We can do.
Guys, do you guys any parting thoughts? Any final thoughts before I start kicking you out of here? I can tell you this. It started off rough, and for the hundreds of people that stuck with us, thank you very much. I'm sorry we couldn't get JP on here, guys. My heart's broken, and Tickle's mic. I'm gonna bring him a new microphone so that I can get him on here again in the future. But Kevin, Kyle, Matt, and Catfish, guys, thanks so much. You guys are really helping Muskies Canada right now. I'm going to be sending you guys emails and plaguing you to join my chapter. I know, Matt, you used to be a member of Kitchener-Waterloo, and so we're gonna try and get you back. And thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Good.
Yeah, good job.
It was fun. It was really good.
Thanks, everybody.
A new computer, I think.
Thanks, boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And cheers to you.
Airlines.
All right. So that starts to conclude the show. Like I said to the other guys, I'm saying it to you guys as my audience. Thanks so much for participating, your questions. A quick plug here for Muskies Canada. I can honestly say that Muskies Canada has changed my life. It's made it better. I've made true friends because of Muskies Canada, and I would not catch 1/10 of the muskies that I catch if it wasn't for Muskies Canada. And with everything being virtual right now, anyways, pick the chapter with the coolest name. Pick the chapter with the chairman with the nicest hair, whatever it is. If you're in the Hamilton area, hit up Dave Bilal. If you're in Bell River area, go talk to Bruce Bauer. You've got Alan up in Barrie, and Rob in Gananoque, and Jamie in Upper Valley, Nick in Toronto, my good friend Bowser in Mississauga, Marlon in St. John's. I mean, the list goes on and on. Pierre in Montreal, and of course me in Kitchener-Waterloo. I will post in the comments a link for you to join Muskies Canada. It's $60. The money doesn't come to me. It doesn't come to the chapters. It goes to Muskies Canada head office, which is a not-for-profit. It goes into the war chest, and we do things like buy the telemetry tags for Bell River, and we spent an obscene amount of money trying to repopulate Lake Simcoe. We're working on the potential project of the Burlington Bay repopulation on the Grand River in the Brantford area. There's a lot of things we're working on. We have scientists backing us, and so if you want to become a member, we will accept you, and it gets you access not only to information, but it also gets you access to some of the greatest bait builders out there. And if you know anything about the biggest bait builders out there, all of them support Muskies Canada. We can't do it without them. We can't do it without you. Give us your $60 and listen to Gord Pizer and Jim Sarek.
Muskies Canada and Muskies Inc. There is no other organization like them. It is probably the greatest fishing organization from a conservation and from a learning perspective that I have ever seen.
If Muskies Canada or Muskies Inc. went away, the muskie fishing as we know it today, I certainly believe would ultimately go away. I think that anything we can do to kind of support these organizations who are kind of behind the scenes working on all of our behalf to make muskie fishing better across all of North America is a huge thing.
And so if you're not a member of Muskies Canada, or if you're not a member of Muskies Inc. in the US, and you're a muskie angler, you're making a huge mistake.